Well, Joe Biden is yesterday's man, and everybody seems to be in a tiz over Kamala Harris, especially the left-wing media, who are busy reimagining her.
Now, we've always known the left-wing media was biased, but leaked Democrat talking points have exposed just how biased. Have a listen to these news outlets repeating, in some cases, word for word, exactly what the Democrats have asked them to say about Kamala Harris.
She was never actually border czar.
She's been labeled incorrectly by some members of the right as the border czar.
Republicans named her the border czar.
Republicans have always exaggerated what her job was at the border.
Republicans, again, have labeled her the border czar.
But that's not exactly what President Biden asked her to do.
She was never put in charge of the border.
That wasn't actually her task.
Not to secure it, but to address the underlying roots of migration.
The root causes.
Root causes.
Root causes.
The root causes.
Root causes
of immigration.
We also want to point out that right now apprehension numbers continue to decrease.
Border crossings have been going down.
And illegal border crossings are lower right now.
Migrant crossings continue to drop.
Border crossings are way down.
Border crossings are down.
Unbelievable. We're joined now by commentator and host of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, Brad Polumbo. Brad, thanks for joining us. If you listen to the left-wing media, they're literally just regurgitating Democrat talking points.
They are, and more than anything, they're just shameless liars, debasing themselves to defend a political candidate, which, guys, that's not what the role of the media is supposed to be. They're supposed to hold political candidates to account, not shamelessly shill for them and attempt to rewrite history. I mean, we all know, we all remember, Joe Biden very clearly put Kamala Harris in a significant role in regards to his immigration and border policy. And guys, if it had turned out better, if the results were good rather than the hot mess at our border that we've had instead, they would be giving her all the credit in the world for it. But because the border has been a huge liability for this administration, they're now trying to gaslight us and pretend that Kamala was never really involved. She was only given minor duties. It's not true. Many of these mainstream media outlets literally reported at the time that he was making her border czar, the border czar, or the border point person, the immigration point person, whatever you want to call it. We all remember this. And just because she failed at that job and the administration failed to secure our border more broadly, they're now trying to rewrite history rather than acknowledge those failures. And it is just so disgraceful that the mainstream media is doing their bidding instead of pointing out this reality that the White House wants to run away from.
They're clearly not doing their own research here. They're just the dummies for the White House. Now, Brad, Trump's running mate JD Vance has infuriated lefties after these comments from 2021 resurfaced.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too.
Now, he later clarified those comments on the Megyn Kelly show.
It's not a criticism of people who don't have children. I explicitly said in my remarks, despite the fact the media has lied about this, that this is not about criticizing people who, for various reasons, didn't have kids. This is about criticizing the Democratic Party for becoming anti-family and anti-child.
Now, regardless of that explanation, lefties like Jennifer Aniston have slammed him. But does JD Vance have a point here, Brad?
You know, I'm still struggling to see what point that could be, because some of the greatest leaders in American history, like our very first president, George Washington, had no kids, yet were incredibly selfless and made decisions about the future of our nation that were really forward thinking and really went well beyond their lifetimes and their significance and their scope, and weren't just thinking about the here or now. Whereas a lot of people who do have children or even grandchildren have ruled over our country over the last few decades and nonetheless absolutely presided over its decline, buried us in debt, gotten us into unnecessary wars, and done all sorts of things that don't have the long-term best interests in mind. Obviously, you know, you want family to be recognized as an important value. The GOP is the pro-family party, and there's lots of ways the Democratic Party can be criticized as insufficiently supportive of families. But I think the childless cat ladies remark was a real misstep. Obviously, he made it way before he was ever being considered for vice president. But I do think it rings hollow and rubs some people the wrong way who are step parents like Kamala Harris. And I think Kamala Harris probably does care about the future her stepchildren will grow up in, even though they're not biologically hers. I think if J.D. Vance could take back those comments, he certainly would.
All right, Brad, our old friend Joy Reid from MSNBC is at it again, this time taking to TikTok with a message for black voters.
You're going to look real crazy being on the other side of that line, particularly as a person of color. You're going to look real weird and real lonely on that side. You really are going to look crazy being on that side, given the cultural phenomenon of Vice President Kamala Harris.
Brad, to insist that black Americans are crazy and weird if they don't vote for the black candidate is kind of racist, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And I think the crazy and weird one might be Miss Joy Reid here, who's staring into the camera so intently and going on these bizarre and unhinged rants. Look, people of any race are individuals. They can think for themselves. They can have different values and perspectives. And it is absolutely reductive and patronizing and, yes, racist to suggest that just because they have black skin or they're of African-American heritage, they have to support Kamala Harris instead of Donald Trump. Really? They don't get to be individuals? They don't get to have different beliefs on everything from abortion to tax policy to foreign affairs? No, they just have to support the person from their demographic group? That's not progress. That's not social mobility. That's not an open-minded view of the world. It's woke racism. It's a reductive and tokenizing worldview that is increasingly falling flat with people all across the political spectrum and from all walks of American life who are sick of the identity politics nonsense. If Democrats and their liberal media allies want to keep going down this path of black people have to vote for Kamala because she's black, well, and she's Jamaican and you're part of our people and blah, 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 that is not going to work. People need to pay their grocery bills. They're worried about the security of our country. They're done with identity politics. If Democrats and progressive media want to stay on that ship, it is going to sink and they're going to go down with it.
Yeah, absolutely, Brad. Now, before we let you go, Donald Trump spoke at a Christian conference at the weekend making this promise.
Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Now, Brad, the left-wing media are making out like Trump was promising to go full dictator, but that's not what he was really saying here, was it?
No, he was just speaking in his typical Trumpian style, which honestly I can't help but laugh a little bit listening to it. He's just such a unique individual. He's trying to drive out the vote this November. He's telling them that he'll fix everything, and then who cares if 4 years from now if you have to vote or not, just vote this November. Like, the most obvious explanation is the most likely explanation, which is just that he's trying to drive up votes this November, and he's saying, you know, frankly, I don't think he'll care very much because Donald Trump cares a lot about, well, Donald Trump. So he's like, vote this time, get me back in, and then 4 years from now, you won't have to worry about it. I'll have fixed everything. I'm amazing. I think the slightly egocentric explanation for his comments is the most likely one, not that he's accidentally revealed some plan to become a dictator and shut down the elections in 4 years or anything like that, which frankly, he couldn't do even if he wanted to. And I think it's a total stretch and overreading of these remarks. And Trump says plenty of things that they could go after him for. They need to stop making stuff up and going after him for things he never said. It's really exhausting. They've been doing this for almost a decade at this point.
Well, Brad, it's always good to catch up. We really appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you again next Sunday.
Thanks, guys.